Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. I've picked up the Army Painter Speed Paint Most Wanted set, and today I'm going to test them out and see if you should buy this set. As long-term viewers will know, I don't often use contrast or speed paints. I'm more of a traditional painter, as I feel the end results are often better, with a tidier finish, but hopefully this set will change my mind. There are 24 colours in this set and a bottle of speed paint medium. There seems to be quite a range of colours, although they do seem to be quite bright looking, and there aren't a lot of browns. There's also a speed paint silver and gold, which I'm looking forward to trying out, and see what results they give. This is the model I'm going to paint, a Death Korps of Kreig Engineer, which I've primed white, as is the recommended colour for speed paints. First paint I'm using is Beowulf Blue. The paints come with mixing balls in them. And I'm applying some onto my palette. I'm using a dry palette here so I don't water down the speed paints like I would if I was using a wet palette. And I'm applying the paint all over the outside of the coat to the Mini. With speed paints you want to be careful that you only paint over the areas that you want, as otherwise you'll need to touch up any areas of overspill with white before painting over with another colour. I'm applying the speed paint by loading my brush and then moving the paint all over the area. This helps to avoid lines where you've had to reload your brush, as they can really stand out on the finished model. The paint should sink into the recesses and pull away slightly from the raised areas, giving the shade and highlight in a single step. I'm making sure I catch all of the coat and not leaving any of the white primer showing, as this can be hard to paint over later, so it's important to paint everything in a single go. With the Beowulf Blue applied, the outside of the coat is a bright blue colour. Now with Tidal Wave I'm going to paint the inside of the coat. This should give a brighter blue to the inside of the coat, giving a nice two-tone appearance to the model. I'm being careful around the darker blue, making sure I just paint the inside of the coat by spreading the paint around the areas I want to be Tidal Wave Blue. As the paint goes on, I can see it pulling away from the most raised details, giving that highlight effect. But speed paints do give a really good coverage over the flatter areas, unlike some contrast style paints that can be very thin. I'm also catching the cuffs to the coat to add a little bit of interest to the upper half of the model. And with the Tidal Wave applied, I've picked out all of the details to the coat and given a brighter inside than the outside. Now with some Desolate Brown, I'm going to paint any straps and the backpack. This is probably my first issue with the set, the lack of a leather brown. There is a wood brown which I'll be using later, and this one which is labelled brown, but it's more of an olive colour rather than a brown. I would have liked a leather colour, or at least another brown, as it's such a common colour, especially in more grimdark painting styles, but the colours in this set are a lot more bright than they are grimdark. But this will do for the straps, as it is a dirty colour, but it is more of a bolt action olive drab colour rather than a brown. For the backpack, this colour is quite nice, goes on easily, quickly, and giving the shade and highlight effect. With the straps and backpack picked out, next I'm going to start on the mask. For this I'm using Pallid Bone, and I'm painting the outside of the gas mask, leaving the central part white for now. I'm also painting the rope on the backpack. This colour isn't ideal for rope, but without any other browns, it should work, even if the rope will be a bit brighter than I would have liked. As always, I'm being careful around the other areas to avoid needing to touch up these areas with white as much as possible. With those areas painted, it's added a pop of brightness to the model, And now with some holy white, I'm going to paint the rest of the mask. This paint is a light grey, kind of like Celestra grey, so should add some definition to the recesses, but leave the mask looking white at the end. It has done quite a good job of giving me an off-white mask. So now with Slaughter Red, I'm going to paint the eyes. I'm very carefully letting this paint sink into the recesses for the eye lenses. Hopefully this paint should be nice and bright and give the impression of light shining off the red eye lenses to the model. And with the eyes picked out, it's really added some character to the Mini. If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And if you'd like to support the channel, please become a member by pressing the join button down below or joining me over on Patreon. So now with some Gravelord Grey, I'm going to paint the trousers and gloves. As this is a darker colour, I'm being really careful around areas I've already painted. Don't want to accidentally paint over anything, or I'll have to paint the area white again and then paint it in its original colour again, so I'm being very careful with the grey. Luckily the trousers are quite large areas, so it's not too difficult to keep the paint under control. For the gloves, I'm being very careful. I'm not overloading my brush and carefully making sure I paint all over the gloves with grey. The paint does seem to wick up into the gun a little bit here, so I'm going to have to tidy that up with some white afterwards. With the trousers and gloves painted and some tidy ups done, the model is starting to come together. So now with some dark wood, I'm painting the bit of wood the engineer is stood on. This colour does give a really nice wood effect, especially as it gives a contrast between the shadows and the highlights. I'm being really careful around the feet, trying to just get this paint over the wood. And I'm also catching the handle to the pickaxe, being careful around all the other areas, and I'm making sure I catch the inside of the handle, because I don't want any white to pop out because I missed this part. With the wood painted, next I'm going to move on to the black details. And for this I'm using Grim Black. And I'm catching the boots, being careful around the straps, but making sure I catch all of the boots with some black. I'm also picking out the grenades that attach to the backpack, being very careful to not paint anything else, as black will be really hard to correct later on. And at this stage I'm also catching the tube to the gas mask, and I'm going to paint the casing to the gun. I'm being as careful as possible with the gun casing, trying to not paint over anything that will be gold or silver. Due to the way these paints work, they do seem to draw up some recesses and go into areas I don't want to paint, so I'll have to come through with white again after this and tidy up. It is a bit annoying, but as these paints are designed to flow, it will always be a problem with these kinds of paints. With all the black details painted, all that's left now is to test out the metallic speed paints. So first with Broadsword Silver, I'm catching all the armour panels on the Mini. There are quite a lot of these, and they are quite flat, so it will be interesting to see how the speed paint works. The coverage of this silver is really good, as a lot of silvers can be quite thin, but this paint is giving some really good coverage and covering the white primer really well in a single coat. Even if the contrast effect isn't great, this could be a really good paint to use as a silver if you want a nice solid dark metal on your Minis. Where there are details, this paint does seem to create a little bit of contrast. I notice that it pulls away, leaving that highlight on sharp edges, more than it does pull in the recesses adding shadow, but it might dry a bit differently. I'm also making sure I paint the helmet. There's an Aquila on here that I will be painting gold later. You can try and avoid this area with the silver, or paint over the Aquila and then paint it white again after, whichever's easier for you. I'm also catching the head to the pickaxe and the pins to the grenades. And finally, I'm picking out all the metal details on the weapon. This is where the contrast effect should work the best, especially in the drilled barrel to the gun. It does seem to be doing its job on the weapon, so the metallic contrast paints could be a real game changer. And with the silver applied, the final colour to add now is the gold. For this I'm using hoplite gold and applying it to the detail on the gun and the Aquila on the helmet as well, being careful to not paint over the silver. And with the gold painted, that is this Death Corps of Kriegsmen completed. While I'm not 100% satisfied with the final result, the speed paints have done what they should and added contrast and highlights all over the Mini. I think the mix of colours in this Most Wanted set isn't really right for this kind of model, who should be painted in a more grimdark style. The colours are a little bit too bright, with pinks and purples included, that would probably be better for a more fantasy themed Mini. There are also a lot of greens, especially with the lack of browns, so maybe an orc or the models from the new Darkwater set could be a good test for these paints. Let me know in the comments down below if you would like to see me paint a fantasy miniature and use some of the brighter colours, and what do you think about speed paints? They are quick. This whole model only took me about 45 minutes to paint, which is half the time it would take me using layers and shades. So to get an army on the table fast, these are great. Have you ever used the metallic speed paints before? I was impressed by the metallic speed paints. They really surprised me with the coverage and how well they work. If you would like, you can join me for free over on Patreon and suggest video ideas and talk painting. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy painting!